共和党众议院不久前罢免了议长麦卡锡，现在又有议员说要罢免新上任不久的议长强森。另外还有好几位的共和党议员提前退休。共和党到底是怎么回事呢？为什么看起来他们不太团结？这说明了一个什么更大的问题？美国的未来会怎么样？辛恬邀请了美国一位顶尖学者来进行独到的分析，他就是胡佛研究所资深研究员汉森教授 Victor Davis Hanson。汉森教授是美国古典主义学者、军事历史学家和政治评论家，曾经获得总统授予的国家人文奖章。如果您喜欢这种深入分析的专访节目，就请记得点赞订阅。干净世界的朋友呢，请注册账号并关注辛恬面对面的频道。首先，汉森教授认为，目前共和党内部发生的一系列事情，反映出了共和党跟民主党的一个很大的差异。他说，共和党众议院的现实情况是什么呢？那就是在2022年中期选举之后呢，没有出现共和党所期待的红潮，原因有多种。其结果是，共和党众议院只比民主党多了7个席位。
So you would think they would have greater discipline than the Democrats, but they don't. So they have all of these different factions, and they got rid of their speaker, and then now they're going after Johnson, and they act as if they have a 30 or 40 seat majority, and they only have 7, and now they've had this unfortunate development where a number of congressional representatives are retiring, but at least 4 or 5 of them are not even, Gallagher and Buck and others, McCarthy, are not waiting for their term to expire in January. They're retiring now. And that's terrible. They have a social contract with their electorate that they were going to serve 2 years. And I don't know why they can't wait till January, but the net result is they only have a 1-person.
汉森教授认为，共和党在政治上的战略和策略都比不过现在的民主党。
They're not well organized. They're not well disciplined. The Democrats never have one defection. No matter what their disagreement, they keep their disagreements in private, and they're very organized and disciplined. And the Republicans are not matching that rigor. Unfortunately, it's going to hurt them too.
那么共和党人不那么团结的原因是什么呢？
Well, part of it is the left in general is run by dogma or ideology, and the left does not tolerate dissent. So once the party line comes down from the speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, and he gets that party line probably from the advisors on the left, then they all have to fall in lockstep. No matter what their view is on Israel, they will call for a ceasefire, or they will say things that are pro-Hamas, like Chuck Schumer did. He used to be a very strong supporter of Israel no matter what. And now he is really articulating the Hamas position on the ceasefire. And that's because he was told to do that by the powers that be. The powers that be are the people who are running the Biden administration. They're mostly former Obama appointments in State Department, the Justice Department, the Defense Department, and around Biden himself, along with the squad and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who have to sign off on all of these appointments. So they have a discipline.
汉森教授说，就算像西弗吉尼亚州参议员乔曼钦这样的中间派、温和保守的民主党人，以及亚利桑那州参议员克里斯泰·西内马这样的民主党人，他们跟现在的极左派所掌控的民主党呢，已经没有太多共同点了。但是他们在国会投票的时候，90%还是跟随着民主党的党派路线投的。还有像蒙大拿州的参议员乔恩·泰斯特这样的民主党人，他到底是不是一个真正的独立特行的中间派呢？假如你去看看他的投票记录，94%的投票还是跟着民主党的党派路线一致。
And the right traditionally is more individualistic. Let everybody do their own thing. Don't try to suppress free expression. And so we have all of these people that are freelancing across the board. Matt Gaetz says one thing, Marjorie Taylor Greene says another, Johnson says something, and they can't enforce discipline. And it's okay if they have a 20 or 30 seat majority. Maybe they'll get that in the next election. But what the Democrats are trying to do by trying to peel them off, trying to make them vote in a way that's fractious and interfering with the votes for the speaker, they're trying to say to the country, these people can't govern. Look at them. We're disciplined. They're not. And so they're hurting themselves, and no one has the strength or power on the Republican side to discipline everybody. And so that's part of it is that the problem is that Trump is the nominee, and so he's the de facto head of the party, but he's got 5 lawsuits or criminal indictments, over 90 indictments to deal with. And he's running out of money, and he's being outspent 3-1, and the campaign really hasn't started yet.
看起来，对于美国人来说，个人主义曾经是一种优势，但现在却成了劣势了，可以这么说吗？而这现象背后的原因又是什么呢？
Yes, I can say that. And I think they don't understand what they're up against. This is not the Democratic Party of even Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton, much less Harry Truman or JFK. This is a radical socialist Jacobin party that wants to fundamentally transform the United States. And so when you look at the border, it's not porous. It doesn't exist. We've never seen that before. It does not exist. People swarm across at their leisure. There's no consequences for it. The president of Mexico threatens us and says, if you dare close the border, I will do this and this, and I'm not going to deal with the cartels that are killing 100,000 of you. And in the old days, an American president would have said, okay, we're going to finish the wall. We're going to deport all the illegal aliens that you sent up here, and we're going to slap a 10% tax on all the $60 billion in remittances that your citizens send back to you while they're being subsidized on government support by us. But we have no leadership to do that, and they don't want to do that. And so and you can see it with they're doing things that are very radical. They're draining the strategic petroleum reserve again. They're telling the Ukrainians, please do not hit Russian targets that are oil related. They're telling the Saudis, you've got to pump more oil. They know how to play politics with our foreign policy and our national security even.
那么共和党方面呢？
The Republicans, they talk grandly about individual rights and everything, but they're not disciplined, and they don't understand this revolutionary opposition. It's very typical of the people who took over in China and Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua. They always start by saying that we're for democracy and we are for pluralism, but they're very disciplined people. And you can look at what's happened just in 5 years in our major downtowns, where the law is not being applied, looting, carjacking, there's no consequences. There's no consequences for medieval homelessness on the streets. It's very shocking that this has been going on gradually, and now suddenly, after maybe the COVID crisis, the George Floyd riots, the Trump derangement hysteria, it's suddenly very dramatic how much we're watching the decline of the United States. We can see it abroad in Gaza, in Ukraine, and Afghanistan, and vis-a-vis China, what China is doing, threatening seriously Taiwan, threatening the Philippines, buying land in the United States, Chinese nationals coming in with no consequences. We don't know why. You know, I'm 70 years old, and I lived through the best times of America, and I knew there were problems, but never in my mind did I think the United States government would be borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days, or the border would be non-existent. And I can see that in my own community, where here in Central California, they're busing people right up from the border, and you go to a supermarket and there are people that are foreign nationals and they're flush with cash, and American citizens who are very poor will tell you, I can't get into the emergency room now. I can't get my mother into the dialysis clinic. I can't go to the public health center. because all of these people are flooding in and they've got more money from the government than I do. And that's a concern. It's very troubling how quickly the United States is dissolving.
那为什么共和党人没有意识到他们面对的到底是什么呢？
What the left did during the Obama administration and the Trump administration was they took their globalized wealth. So in the 21st century, people on the two coasts where the universities, the corporations, the culture is, one side looking at the EU in the East and the West looking at Asia, they made an amount of money at their disposal and power we've never seen before. So where I work at Stanford University, there's $9 trillion in market capitalization in Silicon Valley with Meta, Facebook, Google, Apple, etc. And that money allowed them to have enormous influence. So they own now, in a very radical way, they control the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, public radio, public television, NPR, of course, as I said. They control Hollywood. They control professional sports. They control the corporate boardroom, like we saw with Disney, or we saw with Anheuser-Busch, or we saw with United Airlines, or Boeing. They control the universities, as we see with the epidemic of anti-Semitism and this woke ideology. They control K through 12. They control the administrative state. They don't have 51% of the people. All the polls show that their positions are unpopular, but the means of communication.
汉森教授说，如果你用目前用户最多的搜索引擎去搜寻2020年5月、6月、7月的骚乱，也就是乔治·弗洛伊德事件之后发生的事情，搜索结果会出现的是1月6号，因为搜索引擎已经被调制到1月6号等于骚乱。人们不明白搜索引擎是如何扭曲它的，包括其他的社交媒体和传统媒体，他们共同在宣传同样一个讯息，这个讯息就是美国是个罪恶的地方，现在正处于一个新的乌托邦边缘，而政府呢是这些问题的答案。我们要摆脱美国种族主义和仇外的过去，要开放边境。人有3种性别或多种性别，犯罪也不是真正的犯罪，那是一群保守的白人老人制定了禁止偷窃的法律，因为他们自己不必去偷窃，但是别人为了生活，有时候不得不去偷窃，但这也没什么大不了的。如果你看到一间空房子，觉得自己为什么没有拥有这样的空房子呢？你就去占据它，蹲在里面也没事，因为那个屋主拥有2间房子，这是不应该的。
So beneath all of these expressions and manifestations, there's the old socialist, communist, totalitarian dogma that drives it. And it's very antithetical to the American experience. And when you have 50 million people who were not born in the United States, you have an enormous project of assimilation and integration. But when you're taking 2 million unlawfully, in addition to the legal resident, then it makes an enormous enterprise of civic education and English language and how wonderful the United States is. But if you're giving them the opposite message, that the moment somebody crosses the southern border, they have legitimate complaints against their host, then you end up with the chaos that we're undergoing.
汉森教授描述的这些事情，对于辛恬这样背景的人来说呢，就会联想到中国共产党统治之下的中国。
Chinese Cultural Revolution was from 1966 to 1976. It can be summed up as the substitution of ideology for all meritocratic considerations. So you basically told in that period a Chinese scientist, a Chinese professor, a Chinese engineer that the degree to which they could be employed or progress or thrive would be restricted by their ideology. They had to mouth a particular cultural revolutionary dogma, and that brought in a lot of opportunists and bad actors to take advantage of that. Well, anytime you substitute ideology for merit, you unwind or destroy a society.
他说，就像法国大革命的教训，现在就是用一种文革式的 woke 的意识形态取而代之，而这种意识形态呢，从本质上说就是，如果你是拉丁裔、非裔或者同性恋、跨性别，或者是所谓 others 其他人，那么你就有权对社会主要群体表达不满，而这让你享有被补偿的权利。根据呢，就是你的族裔或者是你的意识形态，其结果就是你不需要好的 SAT 考试分数就可以进入哈佛。如果你是中东留学生呢，在学校图书馆里骚扰了犹太裔学生也没关系，你是被保护的，不会被递解出境。这意味着只要你声称变性人，虽然你生理上呢还是男性，就可以进入和使用女性的换衣间，也可以参加女性运动比赛，等等等等。汉森教授说，他在大学工作已经有将近50年了，亲眼目睹了大约40次的大学教授的招聘，包括那些不是基于择优汰劣原则的现象。他们是怎么做的呢？他说，比如有2位候选人，一位呢写过7本书，曾经获得教学表彰，而另一个候选人从来没有写过什么书，但是学校呢最后决定还是录用后者，因为那个人的族裔或者是性别。
And once you do that, that's not the end of the process, it's the beginning.
他说，因为你招进了一个不符合资格的人，在以后的评级评估的时候呢，你还是要不断的去给例外。就像哈佛大学校长克劳丁·盖尔，他是一个成绩平庸的抄袭者，靠着族裔优惠政策一路走来，当上了哈佛大学校长，结果几乎把这所名校给毁了。汉森教授说，大学教职员工大约只有 4% 是公开的保守派，因为如果你说自己是保守派，学校就不会录用你。所以不只是族裔或者性别的问题，而是意识形态。而这么做的危害性呢，已经是非常明显了。比如航空公司，联合航空公司的总裁4年前就宣布，50%的飞行员和机组人员，他们将从接受过 DEI 培训的人中间招聘。什么叫 DEI？ 就是 Diversity, Equality, Inclusion， 就是多元、平等和包容。那么在过去的几个月里，我们看到的是什么呢？联合航空公司飞机偏离频道，多架飞机起飞后不久不得不返回，以及甚至飞机机身的一部分掉下来。波音公司的飞机已经有7、8架出问题，威胁到乘客的安全。联合航空公司、波音公司还有联邦航空管理局，他们有一个什么样的共同之处呢？汉森教授说，他们的总裁都曾经说了同样的话。什么话呢？
That we are going to be hiring on the basis of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a euphemism for kind of a Maoist type ideology. They don't just mean people, we're going to be hiring on people's superficial appearance. Because if you were a known conservative African American excellent professor like, say, Roland Fryer at Harvard, they were not going to hire you. They were going to make your life miserable. It's a combination of superficial appearance and ideology. And once you do that, you send a message that there are no, so if you're working on a Boeing, you're a top grade mechanic and you are an assembler and you're in a Boeing factory and you know that you were hired under DEI, well, you know you're not going to be audited. If you're Claudine Gay and you're hired at Stanford, and even though you plagiarize your thesis and no one said anything, then maybe you'll plagiarize another paper. And then when you're hired at Harvard, you'll plagiarize another one. And you think, if they don't demand that I make or I comply with the same standards as everybody else, it must be for a reason. They're either corrupt or they're guilty or they have no confidence in their system. But whatever the reason is, I'm exempt and I can do whatever I want. And you have kind of a red guard mentality where you get incompetent people that put a red scarf around their neck, figuratively, and then they start clubbing people over the head that have glasses on or something. And that's what happened in China, and that's what we've got to be very careful that we don't allow happen here.
汉森教授说，事实上 DEI 的恶果已经开始对人们的生活、工作方方面面产生负面的影响。
It's starting to affect corporations. It's starting to affect schools. And, you know, you can see in California, we need about 5 new dams. But if your ideology says that the planet is heating up, or Native Americans have been persecuted and they need natural streams, instead of building the dams to meet a growing population of 41, they go up on the Klamath River and they say, this is altering we're going to blow up 4 dams. They blew them up, and it caused an ecological disaster with mudslides and dead fish, all because they said, we want to return to a natural 19th century scenic area and give the Native American population, which is quite small, a veto power over the needs of 41 million Californians. So that's what ideology does. And you know that Stalin and Mao were famous for promoting public works or ideas. Every Chinese family must be able to forge their own pot iron, for example, or communities will be mini steel. They're crazy ideas, but blowing up 4 dams on a river like California did when you're $70 billion in debt is pretty crazy. So we're no better than these ideological revolutions in the past.
这么看来，所谓的 DEI 多元、平等、包容，看起来只是关于人的外貌，但背后其实是意识形态咯。
It is. It's ideology. I know so many gifted Latino, Asian, Black conservatives that believe in individuality, free speech, conservative traditional values, and they are persecuted in the universities because of their ideology. So it's not enough to be so-called non-white. You have to be non-white and radical. And the people who are doing this often are not part of the DEI industry themselves. They're very wealthy, privileged, so-called white people who are very leftist. And they do it with the assumption that their ideology, they never have to experience the downside or the repercussions of their ideology.
比如他们说教师工会好，特许学校不好，公立学校很好，但是他们自己的孩子呢，却都在私立学校上学，而他们所推动的意识形态却把中产阶级或者穷人上的公立学校给破坏了。他们说必须把电价提高到每千瓦35美分，这样就可以有更多的风能和太阳能，而不是天然气和核能。但是因为他们自己有足够的钱，他们可以住在加州海岸城市，气候温和，他们不用住在教授所居住的这个加州中部弗雷斯诺，那里夏天的气温高达105华氏度，超过40摄氏度。你得开空调，但是那里很多的人开不起空调了，因为电费太贵。航空旅行也是同样的道理，联合航空公司至少有1半的机组人员都是基于 DEI 招聘的，而那些推动 DEI 的人，他们却乘坐私人飞机。
It's kind of scary because this was dreamed up by very wealthy people that were privileged, as was the Chinese, as you know, the Cultural Revolution. It wasn't a bottom up, just like the French Revolution. Robespierre and all of those people were very, very aristocratic and entitled.
Do you think they realize this gonna, destroy the society that they also live in?
Sometimes they do. They're starting to. You can see it. That's why I'm a little confident. I can see it on both the upper and lower classes. I know so many people.
他举了一个身边的例子，斯坦福大学已经连续第3年使用 DEI 招生了。所谓的白人人口在美国呢是有67%到70%，但是在过去的3年里，斯坦福大学新招生的学生中，白人只占了20-21%，白人男性呢只占9%。这就意味着，在2100名被录取的学生中，只有大约180名白人男生。 这180名男生中呢，要么是运动员，要么是父母曾经在斯坦福大学就读，或者是有钱人的后代，或者是高管的子女，就像毛泽东时代和斯大林时代一样。所以呢，一个 SAT 满分、成绩满分的白人男生，他如果出生于一个中产阶级以下的家庭，几乎是不可能进入斯坦福这样的大学的，那他们也没办法。但是如果说这是一个硅谷的工程师，年薪100万，他的孩子上了顶尖的预科学校，却不会被斯坦福大学录取的话，因为那个180个名额不够用嘛，那么这样的父母他会怎么想呢？他就会问，这是为什么？怎么了？
You created this racial and ideological spoil system, and then you see it on the poor. So you see where I live, 95% of the population is Hispanic, but all of a sudden, the border is not letting in 500,000 illegals a year who are mostly from Mexico, which nobody cared about. They liked that. All of a sudden, that ideology is expanded to let in 2 million a year, 3 million a year. And they're from Africa, and they're from Asia, and they're from Eastern Europe. And they're poor, and they want free stuff. And all of a sudden, if you drive in my town, there's a line out the door a block long at the community health center. And when you go to the supermarket, instead of having 2 or 3 people in line, there's 10 people in line. And they have, instead of 1 EBT card, electric banking transfer card, they have 4. And so all of a sudden, people are saying, wait a minute, I don't like open borders. I don't like all this stuff. Who did this? And I think maybe you'll see, could be 20% of the black vote, 45% of the Latino vote, maybe 60% of the Asian vote, maybe 50% of the Jewish American vote. And what that vote will be, it's not that they like Donald Trump, but they will say, I voted for an ideology that got so extreme, I never knew that I was the enemy. And now they're making my life hard. Why are they doing this to me? And they're starting to say, I don't even care if it is Trump. All I know is that a secure border, a capitalist economic system, a meritocratic society, all of that's preferable and helps me more than this Venezuelan Cuban model that we're adopting. So maybe there might be some changes in November. And I think that's why the left is so intent on putting Trump in jail or taking him off the ballot or bankrupting him, because they know that there's a counter-revolution going on despite their control of the institutions. So you meet all these people who wanted the system, but suddenly the system is seen as toxic or dangerous to their own interest.
所以按照汉森教授的分析，美国人甚至包括一些共和党保守派还没有意识到他们所面对的极左派的威胁到底是什么，应该如何应对。而另一方面呢，一些糊里糊涂的极左派的支持者开始有所醒悟了，意识到那种社会主义共产主义意识形态实际上是与他们自己为敌的，最终呢会伤害到他们自己。对这一点啊，很多经历过中国共产党统治的华人比一般的美国人要清楚得多。不过，到底要如何把美国恢复到原本的繁荣伟大，其实呢，应该就要真正的去了解美国原本是建立在什么样的基石之上的原则和价值理念是什么。那么，美国建国之旅呢，就是一个非常好的途径。因为他的导游斯考森教授和方伟既对社会主义共产主义有着非常深刻的理解，又非常懂得美国宪法的精髓。在这样一个旅程中呢，他们会带着你跟随着美国立国先父的足迹，给你讲很多你从来没有听过的历史故事，去真正的了解美国的历史。在那些富有历史意义的景点，现场学习宪法这个美国立国之本的深刻内涵。拯救美国，保护自己的个人财产和自由权利，不能靠别人，就要靠自己。 那么建国之旅呢，今年第2个也是最后的一次啊，就是在今年的8月2号到8号，这是一个名副其实的老少皆宜的旅程，机会非常难得，所以欢迎大家赶快拨打屏幕上的热线电话去报名。好的，感谢您的收看，我是辛恬，我们下次节目再见。